picking up where we left off of Tragedy and Hope 101, The Illusion of Freedom and Democracy by Joseph Plutner. This, this section, an introduction to Realpolitik. Henry Kissinger personifies the essence of the network mindset. In his book, Diplomacy, he introduces his readers to the amoral concept of raison d'etre, translated as reasons of state or state interests. And Realpolitik, the basis of both concepts, Kissinger explains, is that individual men can be judged negatively on moral grounds, but governments cannot. When it comes to government action, the only suitable judgment is based on whether or not government achieves its ends. Throughout this book, Kissinger praises those who are wise enough to govern by these concepts and practically mocks those who object on so-called moral grounds. In praise of Cardinal de Richelieu, a 17th century French statesman, Kissinger writes, though privately religious, Richelieu, I know I'm saying that wrong, Richelieu, viewed his duties as minister in entirely secular terms. Salvation might be his personal objective, but to Richelieu, the statesman, it was irrelevant. Man is immortal. His salvation is hereafter, he once said. The state has no immorality. Its salvation is now or never. In other words, states do not receive credit in any world for doing what is right. They are only rewarded for being strong enough to do what is necessary. As the king's first minister, Richelieu subsumed both religion and morality to raison d'etre, his guiding light. Richelieu was indeed the manipulator described and did use religion as a tool of manipulation. He would no doubt have replied that he had merely analyzed the world as it was, much as Machiavelli had. Like Machiavelli, he might well have preferred a world of more refined moral sensibilities. But he was convinced that history would judge his statesmanship by how well he had used the conditions and the factors he was given to work with. To clarify, according to statesmen like Kissinger, the moral and legislative laws that limit the action of ordinary men do not apply to a select few. To escape accountability, the ruling class needs only to invoke the name of the state. This, of course, is the same position held by past rulers who justify theft, deceit, torture, slavery, and slaughter in the name of God. The tactic has simply been modernized. Our new rulers have substituted the state for God, and conveniently for them, they are the state, and not just any state. They are the emerging, omnipotent, global state. Those citizens have been conditioned to believe that their statesmen and government instruments are in place to serve them. Nothing can be further from the truth. Both the instruments and statesmen are part of an institutional apparatus that exists for the benefit of those who control it. Put another way, the state is nothing more than a collection of men and women who direct the resources and policies of government. Contrary to popular belief, it is an institution that exists for its own sake, to ensure its own salvation, and to prevent the rise of anything that might challenge its power. This is a harsh reality, and some will surely object on the grounds that the modern state is different. After all, it is built on the consent of the people. Democratic elections enable citizens to vote for who their leaders will be. They can choose from Republicans or Democrats. They can throw either out of office if they break their campaign promises. Right. They can, but do they? No. But what if our so-called representative government is all a carefully crafted illusion? What if the network chooses the candidates that we got to vote for? What if the network's experts, not the figureheads placed in official positions of power, are the ones who ultimately determine government policy? What if both political parties, right and left, are controlled by the exact same people? Quigley shines some more light on this topic as well. The argument that the two parties should represent opposite ideals and policies, one perhaps of the right and the other of the left, is a foolish idea acceptable only to doctrinaire and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should almost be identical so that the American people can throw rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policy. Quigley goes even further when describing the system that's now emerging. It is increasingly clear that in the 20th century, the expert will replace the democratic voter in control of the political system. Hopefully, the elements of choice and freedom may survive for the ordinary individual, in that he may be free to make a choice between two opposing political groups, even if these groups have little policy choice within the parameters of the policy established by the experts. In general, his freedom and choice will be controlled within very narrow alternatives. Does that statesman alarm you? Let's hope so. Facing reality. Using Quigley's work as a starting point, this book will highlight how a small group of dominant men were able to secure control of local, national, continental, and even global policy. Through the power of this network is not complete, they are moving inexorably in that direction without increased awareness and resistance. Their unelected and unaccountable global state will become a reality, and through the illusion of national sovereignty might be maintained. And though the illusion of national sovereignty might be maintained, the freedom of the world's citizens will be controlled within very narrow alternatives. Did I just read that? I may have, whatever. Before moving on to the next chapter, here are some of the key insights we will cover in this book. Real power is unelected. Politicians change, but the power structure does not. The network operates behind the scenes for its own benefit, without ever consulting those who are affected by its decisions. The network is composed of individuals who prefer anonymity. They are satisfied to possess the reality rather than the appearance of power. This approach of secretly exercising power is common throughout history because it protects the conspirators from the consequences of their actions. A primary tactic for directing public opinion and government policy is to place willing servants in leadership positions of trusted institutions, media, universities, governments, foundations, etc. If there is ever a major backlash against a given policy, the servant can be replaced. This leaves both the institution and the individuals who act directly This leaves both the institution and the individuals who actually direct its power unharmed. Historically, those who establish sophisticated systems of domination are not only highlighted intelligent, they are supremely deceptive and ruthless. They completely ignore the ethical barriers that govern a normal human being's behavior. They do not believe that the moral and legislative laws which others are expected to abide by apply to them. This gives them an enormous advantage over the masses that cannot easily imagine their mindset. Advances in technology have enabled modern rulers to dominate larger and larger areas of the globe. As a result, the substance of national sovereignty has already been destroyed, and whatever remains of its shell is being dismantled as quickly as possible. The new system they're building, which they themselves refer to as the New World Order, will trade the existing illusion of democracy-directed government for their long-sought, expert-directed, authoritarian technocracy. To be sure, it's difficult to accept these statements upon first hearing them. They challenge our worldview and force us to reconsider everything that we've been taught to believe. It's much easier to dismiss these facts without further investigation. It's easier to accept comforting lies that alleviate our anxieties. But this, of course, is exactly the opposite of what must be done. If we allow ourselves to be manipulated, we empower the network at our own expense. To be sure, it's difficult to accept these statements upon Edward Bernays, perhaps more than anyone, helped establish the modern system of public manipulation. Drawing on the psychoanalytical techniques of his uncle, Sigmund Freud, Bernays became known as the father of propaganda. His low opinion of the masses is best expressed in his own words. The following quotes are taken from his book, Propaganda. No serious sociologist any longer believes that the voice of the people express any divine or specifically wise and lofty idea. The voice of the people expresses the mind of the people, and the mind is made up for it by the group leaders and by those persons who understand the manipulation of public opinion. If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group in mind, it is not possible to control the regiment, the masses. If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, it is not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it. Whatever attitude we choose toward this condition, we are dominated by a small number of persons who understand the mental processes of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind and contrive new ways to guide the world. Political campaigns today are all sideshows. A presidential candidate may be drafted in response to overwhelming popular demand. Trump. But it is well known that his name may be decided upon by a half-dozen men sitting around a table in a hotel room. The conscious manipulation of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Bertrand Russell, historian, philosopher, mathematician, co-founder of analytic philosophy, and expert on the scientific method of human manipulation, describes a global society of experts this way. The society of experts will control propaganda, education. It will teach loyalty to the world government, make nationalism high treason. The government, being an oligarchy, will instill submissiveness into the great bulk of the population. It is possible that it may invent ingenious ways of concealing its own power, leaving the forms of democracy intact, and allowing the plutocrats or politicians to imagine that they are cleverly controlling these forms. Whatever the outward forms may be, All real power will come to be concentrated in the hands of those who understand the art of scientific manipulation. Purveyors of the democratic illusion assure us that sophisticated conspiracies and powerful secret societies exist only in the minds of paranoids, extremists. Their assurances are a lie. With Quigley as our guide, we'll trace the origins and operations of the network that, by concealing its own power, seeks to secretly dominate our world. And that's it for Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Power Behind the Throne, next time.